So I'll be able to record for those who are not available, because some are requesting for the work to be recorded. So it will be done. So you will get it after the class. So we can now proceed. I was not able to make up for the Thursday class, but we have done something on Wednesday. I don't know how far we discussed on Wednesday. So we were dealing with CAPM. We were discussing something on CAPM, the capital asset pricing model. So we had looked at the factors or assumptions under which it was able to operate. Then we discovered that it only deals with systematic risk, which we are able also to establish how to measure the systematic risk by using the beta factor, or coefficient. So we have done some questions on how to compute the beta factor or coefficient. So I will still do one more question. On that beta factor or coefficient as we proceed on the same area. So I think we did like 2 questions on that. We had done like 2 questions on that element. So let us get another question still on how to compute the beta factor or coefficient. On how to compute the beta factor or coefficient. So the next question I would like us to check, should be from the sitting of May 2012. We can check a question for the sitting of May 2012. Question 5, you check on page 84. On page 84, you'll be able to identify that question. It is meant to be in the sitting of May 2012, question number 5, part C, on page 84. On page 84. So that question 5, part C, the one for a financial analyst. A financial analyst expects 2 stocks, A and B, to generate a return based on the market performance. The following table shows the analyst's expected return. So they were able to give you market return, stock A return, and also stock B return. They are all in percentages. So I'm only doing the Roman letter 1. So required Roman letter 1, they were asking you to compute the beta of the 2 stocks. The beta for the 2 stocks. So the previous 2 questions we did, I had shown you how to get the beta factor for that. I had shown you how to get the beta factor. There were 3 methods, and we had already applied 2 of them. There were 3 methods. We had already applied 2 of them. So the first method was when you want to get the beta factor of security X. It was basically the covariance between security X and the market. Then you are dividing by the variance of the market. We had already used that equation in one of the questions that we did. That was the first formula on how to get the beta factor of security X. You just get the covariance between security X and the market. Then we divide by the variance for the market. Then the second formula that we also used in one of the other questions was that to compute the beta factor for security X, it was also correlation coefficient between security X and the market, multiplied by the standard deviation of security X, divided by the standard deviation for the market. That was also another formula I used in the second question that we did. When you want to get the beta factor of security X, it is simply correlation coefficient between security X and the market, multiplied by the standard deviation of security X, divided by the standard deviation for the market. So for this question, I will use the third formula I've given you. So the third formula is that if I want to get the beta factor of, let's say, security X, it will simply be changes in returns of security X, we divide by changes in returns of the market. So changes is the difference between the highest and the lowest. Those changes are simply the difference between the highest and the lowest. So you want to do that question where we compute the beta for the two stocks. There will be for stock A and stock B. So we start with the beta for stock A. The beta for A changes in returns of that stock A. You can see the highest is 30%, the lowest is 2%. So you simply take 30%, divide by 2%. Changes in returns of the market to do the same. The highest is 20, the lowest is 6. That will give you the beta factor for stock A. It is like the gradient of the straight line. Changes in Y divided by the changes in X. Returns of security X will be plotted on Y. Returns of the market will be plotted on X. Then now it will give you the beta for that. So we shall also be required to compute. So the question is May 2012. May 2012, question number 5, part C. You check May 2012, question 5, part C. Then we do the same for the beta for stock B. For stock B, you also take the change in returns where you take 16 minus 8, then you also divide again by 20 minus 6, because for the market it is common for them. For the market, it was meant to be common at that level. So that was now the requirements on how to get the beta factor. You are only learning how to compute the beta factor from the previous class. You are only learning how to compute the beta factor as from our previous class. So now, after the beta factor, I want us now to write something brief about security market line. We can now have a brief subtopic as security market line. We can now have a subtopic as the security market line. We can have a brief subtopic as security market line. The security market line. So when it comes to the security market line, we had already discussed about the capital market line, where we use them to estimate the returns. For the portfolio theory, we use the capital market line, but for CAPM, we are going to use the security market line. So we can write something brief on that. We can summarize that. The security market line is similar to the capital market line. It is similar to the capital market line. It is similar to the capital market line, except in the following ways. Except in the following ways. Number one will be that the capital market line deals with efficient portfolios. The capital market line deals with efficient portfolios. It deals with efficient portfolios, while the security market line, deals with efficient securities, while the security market line deals with efficient securities. It deals with efficient securities. The number two will be that the capital market line deals with the total or business risk. The capital market line deals with the total or business risk. Total or business risk as measured by the total or the business risk as measured by the standard deviation, as measured by the standard deviation, while the security market line deals with systematic risk. It deals with the systematic risk as measured by the systematic risk as measured by the beta factor, as measured by the beta factor or beta coefficient, measured by the beta factor or the beta coefficient, the beta factor or the beta coefficient. Then another paragraph, you note that security market line can be represented. Security market line can be represented using a diagram as follows. It can be represented using a diagram as follows. It can be represented using a diagram as follows. It can be represented using a diagram as follows. So we can now simplify this diagram on how to draw the security market line. So in our diagram, so this side, we shall be able to come up with expected returns. In this other region, we shall be having the beta factor. This one, we shall have it as the beta factor. Then we shall start from 0. Then we shall be having risk-free rate, and also expected return for the market. So risk-free rate, expected return for the market. Then we shall also be having the beta factor for the market. The beta for the market. So this part, it will be the market. So this one is the beta for the market, and it is always equal to 1. The beta for the market is always equal to 1. Then this is the risk-free rate. This one is expected return for the market. So expected return for the market, the beta factor for the market. So our security market line, it will originate from the risk-free rate. Then it will go like that. So this is now our security market line, like that. So that will be our security market line. So security market line, it will originate from the risk-free rate. It will go through the market in that order. So market is identified by beta for the market, then expected return for the market. So the beta factor for the market is always equal to 1. So security market line will originate from the risk-free rate. It will go through the market in that order. So to identify the market, you use beta for the market and expected return for the market. And now we shall be having the risk-free rate. So risk-free rate is the minimum interest that is normally charged by the government on its securities. So our security market line will be able to originate from the risk-free rate. It will pass through the market. So identify the market, use the beta for the market up, and also expect a return from the market. Where they meet, that will be our market. So now it will originate from there. It passes through the market as it extends towards the other area. Then, at the moment, our security has a beta factor, which is less than 1. It means this one will be defensive. Defensive security. This will be defensive security. But any security whose beta factor will be more than 1, this one will be aggressive security. So we shall be able to have them. So any security whose beta factor will be less than 1, that's from 1 and below, that will be defensive. We shall be explaining what we mean by a defensive security and also what we mean by aggressive security. Then now we check them how they are normally traded on the security exchange. So that's now a diagram we shall be using so that we come up with. So remember, this must be x-axis. This one should be y. So this one is the y axis. So we can have them simplified that. Then now we can write something brief. We can write something brief is that the market security, a paragraph that the market security or portfolio, the market security or portfolio is a representative of all the securities in the market, is a representative of all the securities in the market, is a representative of all the securities in the market, and its beta factor is equal to 1, and its beta factor is equal to 1, and its beta factor is equal to 1. Then another paragraph, we note that a security with a beta factor, which is greater than 1, a security with a beta factor which is greater than 1 is considered to be more sensitive, to the systematic risk, is considered to be more sensitive to the systematic risk, is considered to be more sensitive to the systematic risk when compared with the market security. Therefore, it is aggressive security. And another paragraph is that a security whose beta factor is less than 1, a security whose beta factor are less than 1 is considered to be less sensitive, to the systematic risk, when compared to the market security, the market security when compared to the market security. Therefore, it is a defensive security. Therefore, it is a defensive security. Therefore, it is a defensive security. Then another paragraph is that the security market line, can be represented using an equation as follows. The security market line can be represented using an equation as follows. It can be represented using an equation as follows. It can be represented using an equation as follows. So the equation for the security market line, it will be that returns of the security will be given by risk-free rate, n plus in brackets expected return of the market minus the risk-free rate divided by the beta factor of the market. Then we multiply by the beta factor of the security limit. So when you want to get the return of the security, it is simply equal to the risk-free rate. Then we add in brackets expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate divided by the beta factor for the market. Then you also multiply the beta factor for the security. But we have simply said that the beta factor for the market is always equal to 1. So from that, it means that our equation will be the return on the security will be the risk-free rate, then expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate, and the beta factor of the security. We do away with the beta factor for the market because it will be equal to 1. So when it is equal to 1, we do away with it. So finally, this now will be our security market line equation. This now will be our equation. And this region is the same as the risk premium. This region will be the same as the risk premium. So under CAPM, this is the formula we should be using to get the returns of the security. That will be the formula that we should be applying to come up with the returns of the security. So we can now check some few questions to see how we can apply that particular security market line. So one of the questions is what we started with in our last class. So that question that we did, so that question must have been November 2018. November 2018, question 4, part B. November 2018, question number 4, part B. November 2018, question number 4, part B. So that question 4, part B, it should be on page 35. 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 So there is a question number 4, part C. For those who are in the previous class, we did that question from letter 1. That question 4, part B. So we had already done the Roman letter 1. Roman letter 1, remember we calculated the beta coefficient of security A and B. I don't know whether we did that. The complete for both amount effect for only one. We got the beta for A and the beta for B. A is equal to 0.713. Then B is equal to 0.3. Yeah, so those were the beta coefficient that we calculated. So that was the Roman letter 1. So now we go to the Roman letter 2. Roman letter 2 is where they were asking that using CAPM, determine the minimum required rate of return on on the securities. They want you to get the minimum required rate of return on the security. So to get the minimum return on the security, we use the security market line. So return of the security is the risk period. Then we add expected return for the market minus the risk period, then the beta factor of the security. Now the return of the security will be given by risk-free rate. Then we add in brackets the expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate, then the beta factor of the security. So when you go through the question, they gave you the treasury bill yield rate. That's the same as our risk-free rate. Any return of the government security will always represent the risk-free rate. So the treasury bill yield rate will be our risk-free rate. So we start with the return for N. So return for N will be risk-free rate is given as 8. Then I want people to confirm where we did that question. We calculated the expected return for the market. Just confirm where we had done the question. When we are calculating the beta factor, we computed the expected return for the market. Calculating the expected return for the market. Now my 11.3. And now or alternatively, you can see the market portfolio. Yeah, expected return for the market for those who are not class, expected return for the market. The question has given you the market returns. You can see the market portfolio. The first, we just take the 16, multiply the probability of it occurring, which is 0.2. Then you also add. The second one is 12. The probability is 0.5. Then the last one, you can see it is 7, also multiplied by 0.3. So that was meant to give us expected return for the market. We had already calculated those figures when we did that question in our previous class. So that expected return for the market, remember, it was 11.3. So this part will be 11.3 minus the risk-free rate, which is 8. Then confirm the beta factor. What we calculated in formula 1. It was 0.71. Yeah, 0.713. 0.713 like that. So that will be the return for A. Also return for B, it is still 8, then 11.3 minus 5. The beta factor for B was 0.3. .356. So that should give you the minimum return for that security A and B. That was now meant to give you the minimum. So risk-free rate will remain for both. Expected return for the market will also remain for both. Then now once you complete that area, we should be able to get the minimum return for the security. You just take the risk-free rate plus in brackets expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate. Then we multiply by the beta for that security, the beta factor for that security. So that is on that question. That was now on the Roman letter 2. Then I want us now to get another question. This one should be November 2015. We check now November 2015. November 2015. Question number 2, part C. November 2015. Question number 2, part C. Now check November 2015. There is a question number 2, part C. November 2015. Question number 2, part C. So check on page 59. Check on page 59. You will be able to see the question number 2, part C. Question number 2, part C. You will be able to see that question number 2, part C. November 2015. Question number 2, part C. But first, you can check part B. Part B, they were asking you to explain the meaning of the beta coefficient. That meaning of the beta coefficient, I gave it to you in your notes when we were starting that element. But now when we shall be interpreting, I'll be able to explain further on that. So let us go to part C. Part C of the question, you are asked that the following data have been provided with respect to 3 shares. With respect to 3 shares traded on the Nairobi Security Exchange. So risk-free rate of return is given, beta coefficient is given. So return on the NSE index. NSE index is the Nairobi Security Exchange Index. That is now the return for the market. So they gave you 0.185, but you should show it as a percentage. You multiply by 100. Returns must always be expressed in form of the percentage. So now required Roman letter 1, interpret the beta coefficient of share A and B. Roman letter 2, using CAPM, compute the expected return on share A, B, and C. That's now what we have done. We get the return for each using that particular CAPM part. But let us first make the interpretation of the beta coefficient in Roman letter 1. We can now make the interpretation of the beta coefficient on the Roman letter 1. So Roman letter 1, we start with beta for security A. We start off with the beta factor for security A. So the beta for M, the beta factor for security A, you can see they have given you 1.34. You can see the 1.34. That is the beta coefficient, which the question has given us for share A. So they want you to interpret that. They want you to interpret that. So we are comparing with the market. From the diagram we drew, we discovered that the beta factor for the market was 1. Then, when the beta factor was greater than 1 in the notes I gave you, it means that that security is more sensitive. Then it was aggressive. Then it was aggressive. But before then, we need to make the clear interpretation like that. So let us now interpret this one. To start with beta for A. So beta for A, you write it as 1.34. When the beta for A is 1.34. What does it mean on that occasion? So we can summarize that. It implies that if the returns of the market portfolio, it implies that if the returns of the market portfolio, it implies that if the returns of the market portfolio change by 1 unit, if the returns of the market portfolio change by 1 unit, it changed by 1 unit, then the returns of share A, will change by 1.34. Then the returns of share A will change by 1.34, meaning that returns of share A, are more sensitive. Returns of share A are more sensitive. The returns of share A are more sensitive to the changes in the market portfolio, are more sensitive to the changes in the market portfolio. They are more sensitive to the changes in the market portfolio. Hence, it is aggressive security. Changes in the market portfolio. Hence, it is aggressive security. It is aggressive security. So that's now the meaning of 1.34. It simply means that if the market returns change by 1 unit, the return for the share will change by what? 1.34. And 1.34 is more than 1. It means that security is more sensitive to the changes in the market portfolio, and therefore it will be aggressive security. Let us now go to the beta factor for B. We also make the interpretation for the beta factor for B. For B, they have given you one. When you check in the question, the beta for B is given as 1. So the same explanation. That means that when the return for the market is changing by 1 unit, the return of the security is also doing what? Changing by 1 unit. Maybe we can note that, we can simplify that. This implies that if the returns of the market portfolio, it implies that if the returns of the market portfolio, change by 1 unit, if the returns of the market portfolio change by 1 unit, then the returns of share B, will also change by 1 unit. Then the returns of share B will also change by 1 unit. Then we continue by noting that since it is beta factor is equal to 1, then it is the market security. Since it is beta factor is equal to 1, then it is the market security. So that is now for B. So we now also make the interpretation for the beta factor for C. So C is given as 0.75. The beta factor for C, they were able to give you 0.75. So even for that, we write that it implies that if the returns of the market portfolio, change by 1 unit, if it changed by 1 unit, then the returns of share C, will change by 0.75. The returns of share C will change by 0.75. Meaning that returns of share C are less sensitive. The returns of share C are less sensitive to the changes in the market portfolio. They are less sensitive to the changes in the market portfolio. Hence, it is a defensive security. So that is now the interpretation. When you want to make the interpretation, we show it. So the beta factor that you are given, it is giving you the changes in returns of that security. If the returns of the market has changed by 1. When the returns of the market change by 1, it means the return for share A is changing by 1.34. That's why it is more sensitive to the changes in the return, and therefore it is aggressive. But now for this one, when the market is changing by 1, it is also changing by 1. It means it is a market security. But this one is defensive, because when the market changes by 1, it is changing by 0.7. So it is less sensitive to the changes in the market. So that's now the interpretation of the beta factor. So let us now go to the Roman letter of the same question. So now Roman letter 2, they were advised, they were saying that using CAPM, or asset pricing model, compute the expected returns on the shares of A, B, and C. They would like you to compute the expected returns of the shares of A, B, and C. So we just apply our security market line. We simply apply our security market line. So according to our security market line, returns of the security, it is supposed to be given by risk-free rate, expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate, then the beta factor of the security, then the beta factor of the security. So we start off with returns of L, the returns for L. So return for L, risk-free rate, just confirm under L. Are you able to see the risk-free rate? I'm going to pay 12%. Then expected return for the market is the one for the NSC index. So we should have it as a percentage. So they gave you an index. So multiplied by 100% to convert it into a percentage, it will be 18.5%. Which will be 18. So always the returns must be in form of percentages. So they give you an index multiplied by 100 to show it as a percentage. So it is 18.5. Then minus 8. Then the beta for minus 12. So the beta for that is given as 1.34. So that will be for A. That will be for A. Then we will do the same for the return. B. It is still 12. Then this is still 18.5. Also still minus 12. The beta is 1.00. Then you also have C. The risk-free rate is still 12. The return for C is still 12. Then we also add 18.5 minus 12. The beta is 0.75. Beta factor 0.75. So that now we're given the returns of each security. To be able to give you the return for each security. So that was for that element, how to get the returns. So you can now get another question. So the next one should be for the sitting of December 2021. December 2021, question number 2, part A. December 2021, question 2, part A. So check on page 5. We check on page 5. There is a question number 2, part A. We check on question 5. There is a question number 2, part A. So when you check on page 5, there is a question number 2, part A. So that question 2, part A for December 2021, they gave you information about Melda holds the following portfolio for the 4 risk assets and a deposit in a risk-free asset and a deposit in a risk-free asset. So they have given you asset A, B, C, D, and also risk-free asset. They gave you the portfolio weights, also the current return, and also the return. The overall return on the market portfolio for the risk asset is meant to be 11%. So required, determine the assets which are inefficient, efficient, or super efficient using the capital asset pricing model. Using the capital asset pricing model. So under the portfolio theory, when you are using the capital market line, we discovered how to determine whether the security is inefficient, efficient, or super efficient. Because what you need to do is you get the returns as per the security market line. Then compare that with what you have been given. You can see like now A, you have been given 12. So that is now the return for the security. But this one is the benchmark. The security market line is what? The benchmark. So compare that with what you are given. What you are given for A is 12. So if that 12 will be more than this, because this one is the benchmark. This one is a benchmark. If the security gives you more than the benchmark, it is super efficient. If the security gives you less than the benchmark, it is inefficient. But if the two are the same, it means it is what? Efficient. That's now basically what they require you to do. So what you need to do now is to calculate for each this return. Then compare with what you have been given. Then you will be able to tell whether it is super efficient, efficient, or inefficient. So the question is December 2021. December 2021, it is question number 2, part A. In your past papers, check on page 5. Check on page 5, that's where we are. So in our arrangement to show which one is efficient, inefficient, or super efficient. Then another challenge in the question, you are not given the risk-free rate. The question has not given you the risk-free rate, but they gave you the risk-free asset. They have given you a risk-free asset. When the security is risk-free, the returns of that security normally represent the risk-free rate. When the security is risk-free, the return of a risk-free security will be representing the risk-free rate. So maybe we can have an NB or a not. Let us just have a note on that. We can write something small on that by summarizing that. When the security is risk-free, when the security is risk-free, when the security is risk-free, the returns of the security, would represent the returns of the security would represent the risk-free rate. The return of the security would represent the risk-free rate. The return of the security would represent the risk-free rate. Therefore, in this case, the current return, of 5%, the current return of the 5% would represent the risk-free rate. The current return of the 5% would represent the risk-free rate. The current return of the risk-free would represent the risk-free rate. Would represent the risk-free rate. So let us now check among those securities, which one are inefficient, efficient, or super efficient. We want to know which among those securities are inefficient, efficient, or super efficient. And we shall be able to tell whether to accept them or not. So you can start with asset. You can have the column for the asset. Then return of that security will be the risk-free rate plus in brackets expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate. mod over the beta factor of the security. So we compare that with the current return of the security, or simply expected return of the security. Then we shall be able to comment. We shall be able to comment whether it is inefficient, efficient, or super efficient. We shall then be able to comment whether it is inefficient, efficient, or super efficient. So we start off with asset A. We shall be able to start off with asset A. So under asset A, we have said that risk-free rate is the same as the current return of the risk-free asset. Then we said it is what percent? 75%. Yeah. You can see the current return of the risk-free asset. It is given as 5%. Then, are you able to see before required overall return on the market portfolio risk asset is given as what percent? So expected return for the market is given as 11. Then we also minus 8. Then you check under stock asset A. What are we given as the beta factor? It is given as 1.5. So now we compute that to give us what is the return of that security as per the security market line. What would be the return of the security as per the security market line? So we have to tell what percent. We get 14. So current return of the security is the same as our expected return for the security. You see, they gave us which one there. So always remember that security market line is the benchmark. So your asset in a 12, but the benchmark is what? 14. So it is inefficient. So it is inefficient. So we just conclude that since the expected return of the security is less than the return of the security, because expected return for the security is less than the return for the security, then it is inefficient. Then it is inefficient. Then it is inefficient. So the concept is that security market line is the benchmark. Then they will give you those expected return or current return for the security. If the security gives you less than the benchmark, it is inefficient. If it gives you more than the benchmark, it is super efficient. If they are the same, it will be efficient. So that one is inefficient. So that one we comment is inefficient. Then we go to B. So B, you can see it is still 5, then 11 minus 5. What is changing there is only the beta coefficient. This one is 2.0. It is 2.0. Then we get the value for that. It is 2.0. Then we come up to the value for that. Sorry. It's exactly 17. Yeah, and then return current return 18. So it was super efficient because expected return for the security is greater than the return for the security. Therefore, it is super efficient. That one you comment, it is super efficient. It is super efficient. So that one is super efficient. Then we do the same for C. It is 5, then also plus 11 minus 5. The beta factor for this one, it is 1 point. Is it 1.2? Yeah. And we also get the value for that. Now also coming up with a value for that. 12.2. Then the question had given you which figure? Requirement to pay. Even this one is super efficient. Even that one, it is super efficient. Even that one is super efficient. Then we go to the next one, which is D. We also check D. So it will be 5 also plus 11 minus 5. So the beta for this one, is 0.9. 10.4. Then you are given which figure? So this one is inefficient. But we do the same for the risk-free asset. We also compute for the risk-free asset. We also compute for the risk-free asset. So risk-free asset will be 5, also 11 minus 5. The beta for that is given as what? 0. So which means it will be equal to 5, isn't there? Yeah, 5. But the current return was given at what? So that one, it is efficient. It is efficient or correctly valued. It is efficient or correctly valued. Because the difference is what? 0. The difference is 0. So that is now how you are meant to make which one is super efficient or inefficient. So for the Roman letter 2, we shall be discussing the limitations of portfolio of CAPM. But for now, we just get to understand that part. So when we are revising these questions, always remember that CASNEP, wakati wataset your paper, hii yenye nakuja hii, bado tu watarudia hii. Bado wataangalia they develop on it. So if you can refer to their previous city, if you can be able to refer to the previous city or which other city, that same question had been tested. That same question was May 2021. When you check May 2021, there is the question number 2 part C. That should be on page 14. When you go on page 14, there is May 2021. There is a question number 2 part C. It starts from page 14. There is a question number 2 part C on May 2021. May 2021, question number 2 part C. The one for Zakaria, an investor holds the following portfolio of the 4 risk assets and a deposit in the risk-free asset and a deposit in the risk-free asset. So they gave you all those figures are the same as what we have done. All of them are the same as what we have there. So we have just answered on that question the Roman letter 3. The Roman letter 3 of that question is when they were asked to determine the assets which are inefficient, efficient, or what? Super efficient. That's what we have done. So now we go to the Roman letter 1, the portfolio return and also the beta factor. We do now the portfolio return and also the beta factor. We should be able to come up with the portfolio return and also the beta factor. So when you compute the portfolio return. A portfolio is now a combination of all of them. A portfolio is now a combination of all of them. So to compute the portfolio return or expected return of the portfolio, you take each return multiplied by the probability. Probability was also given. You can see those weights. There is 20, 10, 15, 25, and 30. When you add them, they add up to 100%. You can see those 20, 10, 15, 25, and 30. When you add them together, they will give you 100%. So we take each return multiplied by those weights which are the same as probability. Like now the first return is 12. So probability of it occurring on the weight will be 20%, which is the same as 0.2. 20 divided by 100 is the same as 0.2. Then the second return is 18. You also multiply by 0.1, 10%, the same as 0.1. Then the next one is 14. You also multiply by 0.15, the 15%. The next one is meant to be 25%, giving us 8. So 8 multiplied by 0.25, like that. Then the last one is risk-free asset, which is 5. The probability of it occurring is 30%, which is the same as 0.3. So that now will be able to give you the expected return of the portfolio. We should be able to get the expected return of the portfolio. We should be able to get the expected return of the portfolio. You take each return, multiply by the proportion, then you add them together. That's now the combined returns. That now will be the combined returns. So after coming up with the combined returns, that now will be able to give you the combined returns. So we are still on that Roman letter 1. Also the beta factor for the portfolio. They also want you to compute the beta for the portfolio. So the beta for the portfolio is still be the same. Where you take the beta for A is 1.5, also multiply 0.2. Then the next one is meant to be 2, also multiply by 0.1. The next one is 1.2, also multiply by 0.15. The last one, the next one is 0.9, 0.9, also multiply 0.25. The last one has a beta factor of 0, also multiply 0.3. So that should give you the beta for the portfolio. When you combine them together, that now should be able to give you the beta for the portfolio. It will be able to give us the beta factor of the portfolio. So in our pair, which the beta for the portfolio is 0.9. So the beta factor 0.9 was 0.9. So that is now what will lead us to the Roman letter 2 of the question. So Roman letter 2, they were asking that using the results in Roman letter 1 above. Deduce the type of the investor. So, which is who is this investor? So you compare that with the beta for the market, which is always equal to 1. So this is a defensive investor because the beta factor is less than 1. The beta factor. So the conclusion here is that he is a defensive investor. He is a defensive investor or a risk averse investor or a risk averse investor. Since the beta factor of the portfolio is less than 1, since the beta factor of the portfolio is less than 1, the beta factor of the portfolio is less than 1. So remember, if it was more than 1, you will be aggressive investor or risk taker. You will be aggressive or risk taker. So he does not fear the risk when you are a risk taker, but this one fears the risk because you operate on the minimum level. So we had already answered the Roman letter 3 from the last sitting question, where they were asking me to determine which one is inefficient, efficient, or super efficient. Then finally, there is that Roman letter 4, where they were asking you to calculate the equilibrium return of the portfolio. Equilibrium return of the portfolio. So equilibrium return of the portfolio, we just now get the return of the portfolio using the security market line. We still use the security market line now to come up with the equilibrium return. So equilibrium return, we use that return of the portfolio will be equal to the risk-free rate in brackets of expected return for the market minus the risk-free rate, then the beta factor for the portfolio. So risk-free rate, remember we said that it is the current return of the risk-free asset. Remember when we did the other part, we did 5. So risk-free rate was 5. Expected return for the market was given as 11. Also minus 5. So this beta, you use 0.905. So that now will be able to give you the equilibrium return. That's now what will give us the equilibrium returns. The equilibrium returns. That is what will give you the equilibrium returns. That's now give us the equilibrium returns. So another question. So someone got the beta for the portfolio 2.525. If someone is saying it is 2.25. Check your addition and multiplication. Everyone is saying this figure here is 0.905. Confirm that. Check on your calculation because the formula is this one. Others online, you got which figure? Those who are online, what was your beta for the portfolio? Someone in your group is saying it is 2.525. Yeah. All others are also still getting 0.905. Confirm your calculation. Mary, confirm your calculation and your additions and see what will come out of it. So that was now how to deal with the question. I still want us to check another question still on that. I still want us to check some more other questions still on that. So the next question I want us to check. So there is a question in a pilot paper, September 2015. September 2015. Question number 5. So you can check on page. That question is on page 65. That is September 2015. There is a question number 5, part B. There is a question number 5, part B, September 2015. There is a question number 5, part B. There is a question number 5, part B on page 65. When you check on that page 65, there is a question number 5, part B. So that question 5, part B, you are given, we had already done it, the Roman letter 1, under the portfolio theory. Under the portfolio theory, we need Roman letter, but for CAPM, now we check the Roman letter 2. When you go to Roman letter 2 under CAPM, they were asking that using CAPM, advise the management whether this company should change the composition of their portfolio or assets. So if it will be super efficient or inefficient, we shall advise them to change so that we get efficient portfolio. We should have efficient portfolio whereby the difference should be equal to 0. So remember, the efficient portfolio where the difference is 0. So in case there is any which is super efficient or inefficient, the advice for them is to change the composition in order to get efficient portfolio. So composition is the combination of expected return and the required return. But the concept is still super efficient, efficient or what? Inefficient. So that question, I will simply go direct on the CAPM because Roman letter 1, we did that part together, where we were also able to establish super efficient, efficient or inefficient. So within that question, expected return for the market, we had already calculated, but we can still check how it was computed. We can also come up with the expected return of the market. We can still come up with the expected return of the market. We can still come up with the expected return of the market. So, expected return of the market, because it has not been given, you are to calculate. You can see down there the forecasted return for the market. Are you able to see the forecasted return for the market down there? So you take each return multiplied by the probability. Like the first one, they gave you 15. So 15 multiplied by 0.2. The second one, you are given 10 multiplied by 0.15. The next one, you are given 15 multiplied by 0.3. The next one, you are given 20 multiplied by 0.25. The next one, you are given 25 multiplied by 0.10. So that figure, I suspect we had already calculated. It was 16.9. It was 16.5. We have already computed. So we want now to use that to determine which portfolio is efficient, inefficient, or super efficient. So we should be having the column on the portfolio. Sorry, let's stop. We can have them as Then the other challenge, you are not given the beta factor. You are not given the beta factor. But are you able to see the correlation coefficient with the market? So now to get the beta factor, we use the second formula I showed you today on how to get the beta factor. So the beta for security X, remember the correlation coefficient between X and the market multiplied by the standard deviation for security X. Also divided by the standard deviation for the market. If you want to get the beta factor, it will be given by correlation coefficient between security X and the market multiplied by the standard deviation of security X divided by the standard deviation for the market. Then also remember that now after that, we get the return of the security, which is the risk premium plus expected return of the market minus the risk free rate, then multiply the beta factor of the security. That's what you have calculated there. Then we compare this return for the security against expected return for the security, which is already given. And now we comment whether it is super efficient or inefficient. So we need to come up with that. So the beta factor for this question was not provided. The beta factor for this question was not provided. So we need to come up with that. We need to come up with that to see how it works. So you start off with stock A. You start off with stock A. So correlation of that stock A with the market. The correlation of the stock A with the market. Are you able to see correlation with the market? 0.55. It is 0.55. So confirm also the standard deviation of A. Are you able to see the standard deviation of return for A? One meter per minute, 15%. That will given 15%. So we divide by the standard deviation for the market. When you check before required, are you able to see the variance? Variance of return of the market portfolio. I'm going to compare 100. So get the square root of that to get the standard deviation. Because a variance is a standard deviation squared. So when you get the square root of 169, we give us a standard deviation of 13. So this one will be 13. This one will be 13. So we can now compute and see what figure I will get at that point. So at the end of the question before required, we're given a variance of 169. So the square root for that will give you the standard deviation. So here you have to prepare which figure? 0.6. 0.635. Then, so that we have after the return of that stock A. So the return for that stock A, risk-free rate number 2. Now on a 5%. Then now plus in brackets. Expected return for the market we calculated for 16.5. You also subtract 5. So the beta is 0.635. The beta is 0.635. 0.635. So you now got there. Not fair, 12.3. So 12.3. Then expected return was given. Tulipewa ngapi? 10. Sasa hii ni inefficient. It is inefficient because the benchmark has given us more what the security is promised. The security will give us 10, but this one is 12.3. So because expected return of the security is less than the return, so it is inefficient. That one is inefficient. That one is inefficient. Then, now we shall do the same for B. We shall be able to do the same for B. So correlation coefficient in the market is negative 0.75. Then standard deviation was 20. The one for the market is still 13. It is still 13 at that. It is still 13 at that point. So, ikiwa hivyo inawapea a beta factor of which value? Negative 1.15. Negative 1.154. Yes. Then now you also put this other part 5, then you add 16.5 minus 5. Then negative 1.154. Then you see the figure.
Negative 8.271. 8.271.
Negative 8.271. Yeah, so it was super efficient because expected return you are given which figure? 18. So this one is 18. So expected return of the security is greater than the return. So it is super efficient. It is super efficient. So do the same for C and also D. We do the same for C and also D to know what happens. So is there any which is efficient? Either inefficient or super. Super efficient, there are how many? Then inefficient are also. So that is for each, but we also need to get for the overall. We have calculated for each separately. We also need to know for the combined. So for the combined, is it super or inefficient or efficient? Let us check for the overall or the combined portfolio so that we can now make a recommendation for that. So we also do the same for the overall or combined. We do the same for the overall or the combined portfolio. We now check for the combined portfolio. We check for the combined portfolio to know whether it will be super efficient, efficient, or inefficient. So combined portfolio, when it comes to the combined, and we check when you combine all of them together, will it be super or inefficient or efficient? We combine them using the proportions. So this time round, proportions you calculate. We get the total market value. We come up with the total market value. We come up with the total market value. So in the total market value, you can see stock A, there were how many number of ordinary shares? You can see there are 2 million shares. The price per share was bigger than how much? 30. So when we multiply, we now get the total market value for A, which is going to be that was 60 million. That is for A. Then B, you know how many shares? 1 million. So you take 1 million, also multiply by what? 25. So that will just remain 25 million. Then we go to C. So C, it is 2 million multiplied by 20. Then we do the same for D. So D to make how many shares? So multiplied by 25, which should give us our total. This 75. So when we add, what are we getting for that? Yeah, so now we can get the combined expected return of the portfolio. So we now get the combined expected return of the portfolio. We can now get the combined. So we use this as our proportions. You take 60 divided by 200. That is now the proportion for A, or the weight for A, multiplied by the expected return for A, which is the next step. Then we go to B. The proportion will be 25 divided by 200. So that one, it gave you 18. You are given 18. also go to the next one, which is meant to be 14, also divide by 200. Then you multiply by 15. Also go to the next one, which is supposed to be 75. Also divide by 200. So this one multiplied by 15. So we also need to compute the combined beta for the portfolio. We also need to come up with the combined beta for the portfolio. We should also be required to come up with a combined beta factor for the portfolio. So that should be 60 divided by 200. 60 divided by 200. So what was the beta for A? The beta factor for A. So 0 point. Then for B, you also take 25 divided by 200. This one we say it was negative. Negative 1.154. Then also 40 divided by 200. Here the liquid are happy. Sorry, the beta factor for C, you got 0.90. 0.90. Okay. Then the last one is 75, also divided by 2. Negative what? 0.858. Negative. So combine them together and see what we get from there. Combine them together to see what we should determine how it has. Comes to negative 0 point. So that we can now get the combined. Now get the combined return of the portfolio, which is the risk created. Expected return for the market. Then what by the combined? The combined beta factor. So you want to get the combined return of the portfolio. Your figure unapata is value 1.6. And that's our getting 1.62. Online unapata is there. Online, what are you getting as the beta of the portfolio? Because there are two negatives. This negative and that is also negative. These ones are positive. Online, anyone who has calculated known as 0.0944. Anyone else? So we can do it separately. If now then here I'm computing separately, then more art, whatever to we shall be getting. What I just leave the 7. This still negative 0.0945. Was online have been given 0.0. They are saying 0.0945. Okay. So risk-free rate, remember it was 5%. The risk-free rate was 5%. And expected return for the market was it 16.5, also minus 5. And the beta factor we use negative 0.0945 and come up with the value. Sorry? Yeah. Yet to quote me the 16.5. But we look at the probability, the forecasted return on the market. Yeah. So it was 16.5. If I put that happen, I know. So you want to know that overall is super or inefficient. We compare the combined expected return of the portfolio against the combined return of the portfolio. So this one, is this. Sorry, 13.125. Then so you see this is super efficient because this one is the benchmark. The benchmark has given us 3.913, but this average was 13. So it is super efficient. The overall portfolio is super efficient. So that will mean that the overall portfolio is super efficient. This figure require the expected return of the portfolio. So that overall is super efficient. The overall portfolio is super efficient. So we want now to advise whether they should change the composition or not. Whether they should change. So overall portfolio is super efficient. Overall portfolio is super efficient. So it should be efficient. If our total is probably efficient, they should not change. But now that it is super and inefficient, they need to change. We should have an efficient portfolio. So the advice will be that they should change the composition of the portfolio. They should change the composition of the portfolio. They should change the composition of the portfolio in order to in order to attain the efficient portfolio, they should change the composition of the portfolio in order to attain efficient portfolio. In order to attain efficient portfolio. In order to attain efficient portfolio. So remember, if all of them each was efficient and overall is also efficient, they should not change the composition. But now we are changing because individual, some were super, others were inefficient. Overall, all of it is what? Super efficient. So we shall not change if all of them are efficient. If all of them are efficient, then don't change the composition. But now that some are super, others are inefficient, we need to change so that we get efficient portfolio. We need to change so that we get efficient portfolio. So that is now for that question where they were asked you to advise whether they should change the composition. So our time is almost up. So I want us to stop there. When we meet, I will get 2 more questions on that. We do conclude that part of the portfolio theory. So we can stop there for today. So we can stop there for now.